Of the study of the Bible, the a wrathful God and the biblical witness, the funny, the scary, and the just plain weird in our Bibles. And as we wait for people to come on, I just hope you've had a good week. For those of you who are watching the recording, you know best because you can just whiz through all the weirdness. Although they've just been whizzing through
the
one
whole thing today. Yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, we hope you've had a really good week and that you're ready for Thanksgiving, I suppose, is the next big thing. And it's not that far off.
2 weeks from tomorrow.
2 weeks from tomorrow. Wow. Yes. Goodness. So, one of the weird things that's happened is we just had the time change, the fall back. So, in theory, we should be more awake.
But we're not.
My second coffee of the day tells me that
No. Not enough caffeine yet.
Not enough caffeine at all. But as you come on, please do. Well, there's nobody on at the moment, so it's pointless saying please say hi. We'll wait until people do come on.
Oh, there's Vern.
Well, this contraption is not working. Oh, how does that happen? There we go. It's not telling us there are people on. Oh, terrible. So if you are online, our little thing that's supposed to tell us we have people actually watching is saying the eye of Horus is saying 0. Oh well. So last week, let's talk about last week. We got to a point in the story of Abraham where we thought it best to wait until we have a few weeks continuously to keep going. And we don't, because we're away next week. We're away the week afterwards.
Well, the week after is Thanksgiving.
So you will all be doing different things. And then after that, it's Advent, when we're beginning our 3-week Advent course. And would you like to tell people about that?
Well, we're going to be looking at a particular icon by a Russian artist, Rublev. And we're going to look at the theological and spiritual information that this icon tries to impart.
Okay, so that would be really, well, it will be really, really interesting. The icon is incredible, and Father Lewis is going to tease out a great deal of the details which people like me would just otherwise miss. And I'm looking forward to learning how to look at an icon, because there's specific things but it's just from the painting of it. Well, it's not painted, is it?
No, the Orthodox call it writing.
You write an icon. See, I didn't know that until you mentioned it. So I'm looking forward to it. We're still arguing, and this is probably more for Kit. And good morning, Kit and Bill, and good morning, Karen. I hope you're doing well, Karen. Father Lewis and I are still arguing as to where the Advent course is going to take place. He would prefer it to be in the parish hall, and live stream it as well as have people there. He forgets that there's a lot of work involved to set everything up, and who does all that?
Well, I mean, you are the minister of technology.
So we will see. It depends who pummels the other hardest, I suppose.
I'm going to win.
Gives in. All right, we will see. So because we're waiting until next year to continue on Abraham.
Now that sounds like it's a long time away, but it's not really.
Wow, next year. We're almost
6 weeks.
Yes. Oh, well. So this week we're going to tackle a completely different subject. A subject whose modern context perhaps overshadows all the other contexts. Remember, there are 5 of them. The modern context being, our context being one of them. And it overshadows even how we look at the Bible, perhaps especially so. And that subject is basically one word. And it is the history of Satan. Well, the one word is Satan. I didn't plan that slide well, did I?
You got to count those words.
Ooh, I think that went really well. It's a good job this is live.
Yes, and see the little devil in the corner. Yes, indeedy.
Mm-hmm.
As with most of the subjects we have covered so far, this is a massive subject. Part of the reason it's such a big subject is because of how history has developed and because of the gaps in our knowledge of that history. So let's begin by looking at a familiar biblical story. One day, the heavenly beings came to the presence themselves to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" And Satan answered the Lord, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." Now, this is at the beginning of the book of Job. The figure of Satan has been a standing puzzle in the history of both Judaism and Christianity. Satan, along with a few others, Lucifer, Mephistopheles.
Say it again, please.
Lucifer?
The next one.
Mephistopheles.
Try again. Mephistopheles?
Mephistopheles.
Is that an American pronunciation?
I don't know. I'm not awake yet.
You need caffeine.
I need more caffeine, yes.
They won't notice.
And the devil are common names to us.
They are.
Mm-hmm.
Including
But
that one.
From where did they originate, and what is their role? The word of Satan is scarcely present in traditional Judaism even today, and is not present at all in classical Jewish sources, at least not in the form we know the word, as the dark presence of an evil empire. The leader of an army of hostile spirits who take pleasure in destroying human beings. This means that the older sections of the Old Testament never had any inclination to believe in a figure that was the ultimate evil, never mind as a personified rival of God. Simply put, as the source and creator of all things, God could not possibly have a rival. And so it was foolish to believe that one being could rise to that position.
And hello, Anne. Good to see you. So what is going on here? Well, let's take a closer look at that reading from Job. And this time, let's add something. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "Well, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it." If you noticed, once again, we see those dastardly footnote numbers. So let's look at what they say. And here they are. In the Hebrew, the word we have translated as Satan means accuser or adversary. But even here, these words don't quite mean what we would take them to mean. When we think back to the story of Abraham in Genesis, we will remember that the time when Abraham met men or strangers who seem human, but are also interpreted as being angels of the Lord. Similarly here, the word Satan is often used to reference humans. For example, in one of the earlier writings of 1 Samuel, we'll read that the Philistines speak of David as an adversary. Will you Americanize that word, please?
Adversary?
Well, it's the same thing.
Yes.
Okay. What was that word we got hung up on yesterday?
I'm not sure.
I'm sure we'll come across it.
We'll come across it.
So using the word Satan. So David was called Satan. But later writings begin to speak of people who could also be supernatural beings. But when it's used to reveal humans as a supernatural being, the word is always accompanied using the definite article, making it clear that Satan isn't a name at all, but a title. So in these contexts, Satan is not accuser, but the accuser. It's more like a job title. Thus, Satan is not seen as a fallen angel, but is part of God's court, carrying out his assigned duties. So if you see the notes here, A, B, C, and D, you'll have it, or the accuser, and then it tells you the Hebrew,
Satan.
Satan, and then or the accuser, or the accuser. And we need to recognize that distinction there. So when we look at the book of Job, do we meet God and personified evil chatting together? Do we find an angelic being in God's court who is allowed to torment Job as a kind of test to see how far Job's faith will stretch? The answer to those questions is an emphatic no.
Satan doesn't make a bet or broker a deal with God by stating that he can make Job break his faith. And this is a common misconception about the book of Job. What is actually happening is that Satan points out what many of us believe of the wealthy and those at ease in life, that they are only faithful to God because they have an easy life. Throw in some pain and suffering, and if you throw it Job's way, sure, it says the Satan, and by extension us, and Job's faith would dissolve like snow. We also have to remember that Job is, of course, poetry, so we shouldn't be looking into the text to see any factual or historical element in the story. What the poetry of Job is meant to teach us is what to do when bad things happen to us. We need to keep on trusting. The book also gives us a theological view of the problem of evil and suffering, all of which also means that the Satan, or the accuser, wasn't there to be a tormentor of Job. Similarly, in Zechariah chapter 3, we see, "Then he showed me the high priest Joshua standing before the Lord, the angel of the Lord, and Satan, standing at his right hand to accuse him. And the Lord said to Satan, 'The Lord rebuke you, O Satan. The Lord who has chosen Jerusalem rebuke you. Is not this man a brand plucked from the fire?' Now Joshua was dressed with filthy clothes as he stood before the angel. The angel said to those who were standing before him, 'Take off his filthy clothes.' And to him he said, 'See, I have taken away your guilt from you, and I will clothe you with festival apparel.'" Now in here there are the footnotes where when the translators use the word Satan, the Hebrew says the accuser or the adversary. Here we can clearly see a kind of court drama taking place in which the accuser, the Satan, or the adversary, loses to the angel who takes away Joshua's sins. What we learn from these two examples is that the latter concept of Satan as an evil personality is just not there. So, what happened?
Well, images of such spirits did begin to develop and proliferate within certain late Jewish sources, from around about 165 BC to 100 AD. Specifically, they developed among groups that may be called dissident Jews, and that group included the early followers of Jesus. It's kind of hard to imagine that we're renegades as Christians, but that's what we are. Within decades, the figure of Satan and his demons became central to Christian and then later Islamic teaching, along with images that are very familiar to us. So, for instance, we have Satan in his subterranean lair. We have Lucifer, the fallen angel, raging against the established order. We have Mephistopheles, the trickster, who strikes deals with unsuspecting humans. We have Belial. There's many ways of spelling that, by the way. Belial, Beliar. We'll come across that one.
Yeah.
Beliar later on. The adversary of God and his angels. And all the above, all those are based upon the same concept that we find in both the Old Testament and in the New Testament. As we've already seen, the Old Testament is actually very light on information about the one we call Satan. For us, this is a being whom we are taught tempts all of us to do evil, and our world is now soaked with images and forms that depict Satan as a personified evil. So how did this happen? Well, as we've heard, the Old Testament really doesn't tell us much about Satan. But during the time of the Babylonian captivity, I'm going to say that again, but during the time of the Babylonian captivity, the idea of Satan began developing into the character who was more of a person, who was someone diametrically opposed to God.
Now, consequently or not, it was around this time that the Jews were in exile that the religion of Zoroastrianism seemed to begin to have an influence on some Jewish thought. It seems that over the course of a few centuries, Zoroastrians' dualistic beliefs that good and evil exist in equal measure and that there is an eternal struggle going on between them began to influence Jewish ideas of Satan. Now, in Zoroastrianism, it's believed that evil is limited in space and time, while good is not. In their worldview, when space and time runs out, evil will cease to be, and good alone will be left for eternity. It is this notion of duality that seems to have had an influence on Jewish beliefs, who then began to personify evil. Now let's look at Satan in the New Testament. Within the post-Second Temple world of Judaism, there arose many apocalyptic texts that we now see as extra-biblical, including such works as the books of Enoch and the book of Jubilees. We could also include the Dead Sea Scrolls here. These texts depict a more dualistic worldview with a personified evil fighting against God. Indeed, we find the archangels fighting against this evil in a way we would recognize. And yet this was still a belief that was found only in the fragments and fringes of Jewish belief. But it was in the air of Judaic thought enough for more than a few to know of this way of thinking.
When it comes to Jesus and his disciples, we can recognize a lot of the images presented to us through them. Although the word Belial does appear in the New Testament, it does so only once, and that's in one of Paul's letters, 2 Corinthians 6:15. And yes, he does use it to refer to a distinct opponent. The one thing to note here is that the word used is Beliar, the R being attributed by scholars to some Aramaic variant. The word favored in the New Testament seems to be the word diabolos. That's the Greek from which we get the English words devil and diabolical. In secular Greek, the word diabolos fully equates with the Hebrew word
Satan.
Although there is another New Testament Greek word, satana, that does the same thing. This secular diabolos defines someone who is a backbiter, someone who accuses so as to bring another person down. And, you know, it's a pretty good description, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm sure we all know somebody or something that happened which depicts that kind of thing.
And it'll be interesting when we get to, there's a later painting where the devil has a face on his rear end.
You're not giving it away. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, but it
two-faced.
Two-faced.
Mm-hmm. In the New Testament, we see the word associated with Satan used several times. From the tempting of Jesus, Satan, to being in the Gadarene swine and the possessing demons, telling Jesus they know who he is, right to the book of Revelation, in which Satan appears as a giant dragon. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon and his angels fought back, but they were defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and the Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Now note that the emphasis, the bolding, and the word in parenthesis there has been added by us for emphasis. So we can see that a lot has changed from early Jewish times to the writings of the book of the Revelation. Yet it seems that Jesus saw Satan in the same way the traditional Jews did, as an internal temptation, rather than as a personal being. When we look at it this way, as an internal temptation, it makes absolute sense when Jesus had his outburst to Peter when he said, "Get behind me, Satan." It just makes sense, and it makes it perfectly clear and sensible.
But going through the whole teaching of Jesus and seeing Satan in this way isn't easy. For when we get to Luke chapter 10, we find this. The 70 disciples who've gone out, the 70 returned with joy, saying, "Lord, in your name even the demons submit to us." He said to them, "I watched Satan fall from the heavens like a flash of lightning." This is Luke 10:17 and 18. Here, the disciples speak of demons, diabolos, while Jesus speaks of Satan, satana. So what's going on here? In referencing Satan's fall from heaven, Jesus most likely had in mind Isaiah 14:12. "How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations." The term morning star actually refers to the planet Venus.
We'll be coming back to this again, won't we? Later
Yeah.
on?
But it later becomes interpolated as Lucifer, the angel that reflects the light of God. Within Isaiah's context, he was writing about a king, the king of Babylon, who was going to fall, but this text later was used to speak of the battle of good and evil in apocalyptic terms. Here, Jesus is using the term not to say that he literally saw Satan fall from the sky, but he was using the term as a pretty well-known apocalyptic reference to the destruction of evil that he said was taking place as the disciples brought about God's kingdom into the world. Apocalypticism. Boy, that's just not easy to understand. It's hard to say.
In fact, we haven't even defined it, so perhaps we should do that. Straightforward definition is a kind of symbolic language which tries to depict a future time of destruction and renewal. There's apocalypticism in various forms in different religions. Within the Christian religion, it's a kind of codified way of describing not factual things like the rivers of blood and the seas, the stars falling out
of blood,
the stars falling out of the sky, but it's kind of referencing in a kind of symbolic and codified way a great change that's going to take place. Now, at the same time that Jesus says such things, he also references the book of Job. And he can do this because Jesus teaches mostly through parables, which requires us to pause for a moment and think. Because Jesus often used metaphor and parables, are we suddenly to think that Jesus is being literal when it comes to the statement he makes here? That is, I watched Satan fall from heaven like a flash of lightning. Is he being literal there? Once again, the images we have are confusing. And yet we do now seem to have a unified image. So where's that come from?
So let's look at the concept of Satan in history. The last image of Satan as a giant dragon being cast into hell became fertile fodder for artists, especially artists and writers from the Renaissance, who depicted a scaly, shaggy creature with long nails on feet and hands, and sometimes even cloven hoofs. In Michael Packer's painting of St. Augustine and the Devil, the mid-15th century, he paints the devil in a way that we would recognize. two-legged, horns, scales, and wings, though the second face on the butt comes as somewhat of a surprise.
Yes, as we mentioned, it literally is two-faced.
Dante's Inferno perhaps is the most influential, although we seem to have taken only a part of Dante's images for this infernal creature. Dante has the devil as a winged, three-faced monster trapped in the ninth circle of hell, where he is not only encased in ice rather than in fire or flame, but he is one who is powerless because each beat of his wings encases him further in ice. Sure, he feasts on people, sinners to be exact, but he also becomes a parable, one asking us to look at this pathetic creature and recognize the pain in doing evil. Artists and writers from the Renaissance began to depict Satan with a more human form. Now the images appear of a man with cloven hooves, goat-like legs, and horns on top. These representations seem to have been inspired by the Greek god Pan. In the 16th century, the story of Dr. Faust, we have the devil coming to earth, and let's see what happens. Faust is a scholar who is dissatisfied with his lot. He wants more. He makes a pact by pledging his soul to the devil in exchange for endless pleasure. Here we are introduced to Mephistopheles as the devil's messenger who enables Faust to seize power, women, and wealth, the usual stuff, before dying like we all do. But in this story, Faust ends up falling into the eternal fires of hell. Today we use the phrase a Faustian bargain to describe a business deal that is low in integrity but high in short-term profits.
We then turn to Milton and his 1667 book, Paradise Lost, in which we find the English poet depicting the devil by means of the name Lucifer. Here we read of an angel who starts a rebellion in heaven, a rebellion that began because Lucifer claimed that God is too powerful. Lucifer is kicked out of heaven. Lucifer becomes Satan, and then we have revealed the real rationale behind it all, that Lucifer wishes to replace God and take over God's power. As Milton tells us, Lucifer, now Satan, would rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. Once again, this character acts as an analogical device. Milton inspired many other poets, writers, and artists to take on the character of Satan, many of them making him an ambiguous figure, rather than someone who is pure evil. By the time we get to the Romantic period in the 19th century, we see Satan being depicted as something of a hero, someone who defies a higher power in pursuit of essential truths. We can see a shadow of this in the Garden of Eden story. We might well ask what was really wrong with what Adam and Eve did. Wasn't it God's fault for having such a tree in the garden? In the Romantics' view of Satan, his pursuit shouldn't have had such tragic consequences.
The images of Mephistopheles, or Satan dressed in red, didn't appear until Goethe's staging of the play on Faust's works. Red tights and a cape became the uniform which identified the evil one, although rather being a character that was pure evil, Goethe had him more like a charming trickster, which kind of leads us to today, where Satan, devil, deceiver,
whatever
is now seen to be something of a harmless, pathetic, perhaps even funny figure who appears in movies, comics, TV shows, and shows up in many Halloween costumes and haunted houses. So, what are we to make of this word, this name, this figure?
Well, when we started off, we thought, well, this is going to be easy. Several million hours later, we're still arguing over what we want to say and how we're going to put it. But it ended up with us asking ourselves the question, what is it that we actually believe in? And it turned out that I thought we believed different things from all the arguing we'd done and rabbit holes we'd been down for several hours. Um, it seemed to me that we actually believe in different things, but it turns out that we don't. Um, we believe in some kind of real evil, but I, I don't want to speak on your behalf, but for me, um, this is an evil which doesn't play into all the images that we have on film, TV, books. It's something far worse than that. And the reason why I believe in a kind of personified, but not in the terms that we see it, is because I've seen weird stuff over my time as being a priest. And I've also been involved with a couple of priests who were pretty much full time exorcists. And so I have seen weird stuff that I cannot explain. And when I think back, it's one of those things thinking, did that really happen? Did I really experience that? Did I see what I actually saw? And some of the things that were explained to me were just really kind of out there. And because I'm quite rational and I like science, and I want to underpin my faith of those kind of things, all that goes out of the window when you get to these certain points of experience. On the other side, I think too many people are very loose in it wasn't me, it was the devil.
And that's the oldest excuse in the book.
It's the well, we're not saying the serpent was the devil.
No. But where you pass the buck. And
and of course, there's the other side of that coin, which is when people say, God told me. You know, was it the shooting of Ronald Reagan, where the guy said God told him to do it? I mean, it's just garbage. And we still have that kind of rationale happening today. It's a good way of avoiding personal responsibility on both sides. So there's got to be balance and sensibility and a conversation about what's going on to try and work out whether there is some kind of malevolent evil involved in this.
Well, I think when you look at human history, and all we have to do is look at the 20th century, and we can see human beings acting in just horrifically evil ways.
Yeah.
And not to say that they were the devil, but they certainly did embody what we understand Satan to be about.
And that's the thing. We really don't need a personalized demon called the devil who is.
We've got him.
Yeah, because we're bad enough. And it's within all of us to do that. I was reading a book about a normal unit of the police in Poland, I think it was. And they're all good guys. Everybody knew them. Then all of a sudden they became multiple murderers because the Nazis came in and says, you've got to kill all these people. So they did. And they didn't, nobody argued. That was it's a horrible book because you recognize yourself as, if you were in the position where your life depended on doing some horrible, outrageous action, what are you going to do? And we have people who kick against it. What was that priest called? Who he stood, they were all in line and they were just picking people out to shoot or to hang. And there was a young girl or some young person who was chosen, and the priest says, I will take her place. And he's canonized now. So there's
that Coble?
Maximilian Kolbe, yes.
Kolbe.
Maximilian Kolbe, yeah. Now thanks for that. From World War II, wasn't it?
Yeah, World War II.
So that divine spark in us it sort of can lead us to greatness. But the darkness that's within us, and I would, for the most part, say that 99% of the darkness is self is brought on
Generated.
by humans, is dark. Kit says, if you have seen a child abused, you've seen an act of evil. Yeah. We were talking about this the other day. In my last parish, we had a guy who was a convicted pedophile, and he'd done his time in jail. He was still on probation, and he came to my church, and he told me all about who he was and stuff. And you're kind of caught between the forgiving nature of Christianity and making sure you protect people from somebody who has that inclination.
Well, Jesus said, be as gentle as doves and wise as serpents.
True. So what we did was, well, be like, somebody who's an accountant who's been convicted and spent years in jail for ripping off a business. And he comes to your church and you say, you're an accountant?
You don't make him treasurer.
We want to bother about your conviction. Here are the keys to the safe and the books of the bank account. You just don't do it. So when it's somebody like that, you protect everybody to the best of your ability, and at the same time, you try and allow that person to be a part of the community. It's not easy. It really isn't. Are there any questions from you about what you feel, what you've experienced, perhaps, in terms of evil, the dark side, man's inhumanity to man, which makes countless thingies mourn? Okay, if you remember the quote now.
If you have a question, just
give us a question mark.
Give us a question mark. That way we know something's coming, and then you have time to type out your question.
Meanwhile, we will shift gears and we'll go to, and now for something completely different. Well, it's different, but not quite completely different. So there you go.
He just enjoyed using that.
I did.
Monty Python.
A lot of people associate the devil, Satan, et al. With the book of the Revelation, and within that book, to a specific number. So let us look at the number of the beast. My apologies to Iron Maiden. I kept doing that yesterday. I was quite annoying, wasn't I? Good.
Mm-hmm.
We come across this number in the book of Revelation where we are told, then I saw another beast that rose out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast on its behalf, and it makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound has been healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in the sight of all. And by the signs that it allowed to perform on behalf of the beast, it deceives the inhabitants of earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that had been wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast could even speak and cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell who does not have the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let anyone with understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. Its number is 666. First thing to note is that John does not talk about the devil or Satan, but is specific in saying that the number is related to a beast who is a man. And that number is 666, which means, well...
Most scholars, when they look and talk about this very strange book, say that it is a polemic, a big rag on the Roman Empire. When you think about this, it should come as no surprise. This empire oppressed the people of Israel and then began persecuting the early Christian church. Its laws and morals went against God's commandments, and it worshipped idols.
It's just like a trifecta of everything, really.
Yeah. Now, historically, at least one of the principal reasons why Christians were persecuted had to do with the cult of the emperor. Now, Jews were not required to burn incense to acknowledge the divinity of the emperor, but this exemption did not extend to Christians. Thus, there was a problem, Houston. In this next text before us, the beast is meant to represent the Roman Empire itself, an empire that enslaved the known world. The number of the beast is thought to be about the Roman emperor. And so the number 666 is thought to be about the most evil emperor of them all. No, not that. Not that guy.
Oh, okay.
This guy, Nero, wearing his happy face.
Yes. He does scowl well, doesn't he?
The name is more accurately known in Greek as Neron Caesar.
And that's an anglicized version of
Yeah,
it.
that's the anglicized version of the Greek name. Now, the Greeks and the Jews used their alphabets as a numbering system, and so every letter had a corresponding number. What this means is that if you add the representative number of the letters together, you could get a sum. So if you add the numbers of the name in Neron Caesar together, you get the sum 666.
Dun, dun, dun. I should have put that one.
Now, although this might sound somewhat crazy to us, doing this was a very common practice. It was common enough to have its own technical name in Hebrew called gematria. Now, there is evidence of gematria in Roman culture. In Pompeii, there's a graffiti where a man has inscribed, "I love the woman 545."
Mm-hmm.
Now, if somebody reading that wouldn't know who the person was, but would understand that the number had been arrived at by this system of matching letters and numbers and then adding them together. In early Christian history, Nero is seen as the arch enemy of the Christian faith, with even sources outside of Christianity telling us just how violent Nero was towards Christians. Now, there are stories of Nero having Christians bound on big logs and stuck in his garden and then doused with lamp oil and set on fire to
light the way for a party.
Yeah, be the party lights.
Both sides of the road, so that would light the way as all the chariots arrived with the guests for the party. Do I smell barbecue? Oh gosh, no.
Dear. Now, scholars are undecided as to why the book of Revelation picks on Nero almost exclusively, but it is thought that the book was written not long after the persecutions in Rome. This particular view seems to see the book of Revelation as having been written somewhat earlier than some other scholars would state.
So why have we bothered talking about this number? Well, because in modern Christianity, the number 666 has become almost exclusively associated with Satan, and it's produced a lot, and I mean a lot, of apocalyptic post-rapture conspiracy theories about the so-called end times, and this number is attached to other people. Obama it's been attached to, etc. It just goes on. The list is pretty much endless. So such conspiracy theories, you should say, need a substantiated corrective. And this is it. This is the evidence you need to sort of get rid of those notions. So Kit asks, no question that there is evil, great evil in the world. So where does the devil come into it today? Is he simply a symbol of evil, or does he have a more identifiable role? Well, as I was saying, there are one of the problems we have is that we probably one of the reasons why God doesn't says we shouldn't have graven images, because we have so many images of Satan. Historically, when we think of the devil, demons, Satan, Beelzebub, all the other names we want to call it, it brings to mind images which don't relate to the one thing we need to know about the dark side, really, and that is it's evil made manifest. And what worries me about a lot of these people who go ghost hunting and things is that they're going to come across things they're simply not prepared for, and they're going to be taking some of those things home with them. Now, the Bible tells us, resist the devil and he will flee. What if you're actively looking for the devil? That is a terrifying thought. And it's... I do believe there really is a kind of real manifestation of evil and darkness and wickedness. I'm just not going to give it the name Satan because of all the associated imagery that comes with it. What about you?
I agree. I think there is an objective evil presence in the world, but I don't think we can. I think it's not profitable to try to focus in on it. I think we need to recognize evil and do something about it.
Yeah. The other problem for me is theological. As soon as you bring into something which it's almost a kind of yin-yang God thing, then God becomes the creator of evil, which is absolute nonsense. And one of the things people say, well, there can't be a God because there's so much evil in the world. Well, like we just mentioned, we're pretty good at producing our own evil. We don't need to have this manifest thing. But it does exist.
Anne has an interest.
So I hope that answers your question, Kit. Anne says, I was reminded by the discussion of the neuroscientist who talks about a 3-part brain, and one part is the reptilian brain, the most basic and essentially based on our drives to self-survival, regardless of others. Yes, there is that. That is the fight, flight, or what's the other thing?
Fight
Freeze.
or flight. Freeze.
Fight, flight, or freeze, where you just gripped by like goats when you just fall over. That'd be great if we could do that without getting hurt.
I think the freeze part is there are some.
Is it going to get all technical?
Some reptiles that do only see when there is movement. So the prey freezes so that they are not seen by the...
So is that your excuse when I say something but I haven't moved and you never answer?
Yes, it is.
And you do tell me you lick your eyeballs. So.
Yes. Yes. I am one of the lizard people.
The reptilian people.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the one of the modern garbage notions that's doing the rounds and has done since... infamous Englishman David Icke produced a book about the reptilians from another planet, but all the people in the Illuminati and people like the Pope and the royal family. I can almost believe this. And, select whoever is a politician that you don't like on either party, they're reptilian. And... Can we get away from this rubbish, please?
I just am remembering a taxi ride in Paris where the
I think you would say when you were abducted.
When I was abducted, the taxi driver was talking about the royal family being reptiles, and there were just this whole list of people that were reptilian.
He was strange.
But he was interesting.
Yeah, it was
It was cute. Yeah,
better than our first ride.
Yeah,
but I'm not going to talk about that.
No. But I did feel like I wanted to have some aluminum foil and put it on my head.
I did feel if he slowed down, I was about ready to tuck
jump
and roll. But he did get us nearer to the railway station than we ever would have gotten, although the police were kind of
with their machine guns and they were standing there.
Yeah, another day. All right, so to our final thing. Let's go to our final thing. And that is to do with the problem with Satan and the King James Version. It's quite usual that when people want to make a point about something, about anything really, then they'll use whatever evidence they can find that supports their view. I mean, it's a psychological phenomenon. It's well known. And they'll use that even if that evidence is erroneous. This especially happens in biblical studies. Many famous experts, so-called, often use one obscure meaning of a coiny Greek word to prop up their alternative explanation of a biblical text. And it happens more than you can imagine. Those without such linguistic knowledge often do something similar. They will take a text from another translation to make their point. And here is such an example. There we go. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down from the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Here we see the name Lucifer, and we might immediately think, oh, this text is about Satan. But is it?
So let's look at another translation. How you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn. How you are cut down to the ground, you who laid the nations low. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly, on the heights of Zaphon. I will ascend to the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the depths of the pit. Here we immediately need to notice two things. One, this is written in a poetic form. It's a poem, and the name Lucifer is nowhere to be seen. The text refers to the fall of the king of Babylon, a king who lived in time and space. The poetic form allows the story to mull on the grandiose hubris of this king, King Nebuchadnezzar. The name Lucifer does not appear in the Hebrew text, as already has been mentioned. So, what is the Hebrew word here? Well, what is behind this translation consists of three words meaning Hillel, son of Shachar, which is probably a name for the morning star, Venus, and is thus translated in our Bibles as son of the morning star. The question that arises from this is, how did the King James editors get it wrong? Well, they got it wrong simply because the translation Lucifer was carried over from the reading in Jerome's Latin Vulgate, not from the Hebrew text. It is just one more reason we have to be careful not only of older translations, but of people who seem to switch arbitrarily from one version of the Bible to another, with no attempt at comparing and contrasting the same verses.
Which is why I always say you should have a number of Bibles, and when you're reading any text, you should have them all laid out so you can see the differences and variations, because each committee, and most of the translations are done by committee now, not by one person. You can get them that American Orthodox guy did his own, didn't he?
Oh,
and a few other people.
Bentley,
yeah. I knew it began with a B. But even there, you still need to have a number of them open so you can see the differences. And then normally there's some footnotes, or it'll refer you to another biblical verse.
There are not normally footnotes. There are usually thousands of footnotes.
That's normal. But we normally ignore them.
Yes, we do.
That's a thing.
Yeah.
And some of us like a certain version. I mean, yes, the King James Version is beautiful. It really is. But as for accuracy, not nowadays. It was written way before most of the texts that we take for granted in the New Testament were discovered.
And some of the oldest texts we now have, which they did not have access to.
That's right. And our knowledge of New Testament Greek is improved a billionfold. That's kind of...
Is that hyperbolic?
It's an exaggeration.
But I've told you 1,000,000 times you can't do that.
Well, you probably have. It's not an exaggeration. Well, so we kind of hit 3 main things today, and we hope you've got something out of it. And if you have any questions, we still have a few minutes, although we've done pretty well today. It's 5 minutes to the...
To noon?
Noon, yes. To the 12 of the clock. So if you have any questions, stick a question mark in there. If you have any observations, remember there's nothing for the next 2 weeks, and then we will be having our Advent. And that I'm looking forward to that. I really am. And we're hoping to be able to utilize some of more of the technology that this program gives to us. We were looking at something the other day, and we wanted to know how we could make something happen.
Yeah.
And apparently it does what we want it to do, but it's saying it does it and us being able to do it
are 2 different things.
Oh yes.
And Kit has got a question.
Oh good, a question. I wonder what that thing is there. Click through mode, reset. Oh. So it still doesn't do anything. So we've been running blind, really, this last hour. I know Father Lewis loves to know the number of people who are actually online.
I do.
Yeah, and we have the eye of
Horus
saying 0. Oh, Bill, not a question. Bill just said, I really enjoyed this class. Me too. He then added, the devil made me do it. Well, thanks. Thank you, the devil who made you do it. Yeah, it's been good fun doing this. We were saying we don't know how we would do this without the technology that we use.
Yeah.
We use Google to look for the pictures. It just makes things so much easier. Well, it'd be impossible otherwise.
Yeah.
We'd be coming with whiteboards to a room and just
you'd have
all over them.
My drawings, which would look very strange.
Yeah. We use a ton of books, and Kindle helps for me, even though I'm not a fan of Kindle. It's good to be able to have all the books in one thing. So when I come to Father Lewis's house, I just have my Kindle and my laptop, and we can work with multiple books. Of course, Father Lewis being old school, he has a full library of books that he's rummaging through, and it gets a bit laborious. Although he does write in his books, and I'm not a writer in books.
Yes, I do.
I just cannot bring myself to do it. But that's my grandfather. My grandfather made me do it, or not.
Kid's got another question.
Promo, the Veterans Day service tomorrow at 10:30. Will it be online as well as in person? I'm hoping it will be online. I'm hoping that our camera person will be available. It's in the church, so there'll be no movement to outside or anything. People are welcome to attend. And yes, it's at 10:30, so we can get to the traditional 11 o'clock-ish for the 2-minute silence. And then and it's communion service as well. So if you can make it, please do. If you can't, then try and watch it in person, assuming it's on. But I think it will be. I've been told it will be. Any more questions? Well, thank you for your time. We've enjoyed putting this series together so far, and we're still talking to each other. So Really?
Yeah, we haven't killed one another yet.
No, not yet. Um, but we've been moving on in three Wednesdays time.
3 Wednesdays
From
from
now.
today. We'll start the Advent.
Yes, and that's a 3-week thing, and then it'll be Christmas, there'll be New Year, and then we're back, and we'll continue with Abraham. And again, I'm looking forward to that. So thank you. Take care of yourselves, and please still keep wearing masks when you go out into stores and things like that. It's still around, and you got to keep safe. And we will see you, if not tomorrow. Not tomorrow. It's tomorrow, isn't
Tomorrow.
it? Tomorrow or Sunday. And if not in person, then online. So goodbye and God bless.